Uh-oh, looks like we got ourselves another PSA label controversy. Except this one is not the one that you're thinking of. No, sir. This is not the I don't like the design nor the color red type of variety. This is the I don't like the distinction of the first appearance kind, which ultimately might be more interesting to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So, as we all know, PSA has been coming out the gates, hitting the market. A lot of books have been showing up on eBay, and we spent a lot of time on this channel talking about, the secondary market sales so far and comparing how they are performing against that of the CGC sales. But what we haven't discussed yet is some of the things going on in the community talking about their distinctions of first appearances on the label. And man, oh man, this is the type of stuff that I love. This brings me back to, the original type of drama that we used to get into when the biggest controversies were people arguing over Hulk 180 and Hulk 181. Man, those were simpler times. But check this out. This is a post that came out of More Than Comic Books. If you guys don't know, More Than Comic Books is a great Instagram account. Highly recommend you guys go follow him. But he shared this post from somebody else that highlighted this one. So shout out to the original poster. But as you guys can see, this is a Spider-Man 2099 #1. It did happen to get a PSA 10, but we're not here to talk about that today. But the thing that we are here to talk about is the fact that this label says first appearance and origin of Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara. Now, if you guys happen to know, CGC for a long time has labeled ASM 365 as the first appearance of Spider-Man 2099. If we zoom into the label here, you guys can see in the lower right corner, they clearly call out this book as being the first appearance. And then if you hop over to, the Spider-Man 2099 #1, the book that PSA is currently calling the first appearance, well, CGC labels this one as origin of Spider-Man 2099. And of course, for science purposes, if we hop over to the CBCS distinction, CBCS also lists this one as the origin of Spider-Man 2099. And I thought it was really interesting because if you go through the comments here, again, a lot of people posting kind of memes and saying whoopsies and things like that. And there's a lot of insinuation that PSA is making a mistake for calling this book the first appearance and the origin of this particular character. But the question is, who gets to decide the labels of certain books and the actual first appearances of them? Well, ultimately, the answer is nobody, and also anybody. If we go over to Key Collector here, Key Collector actually does say that Spider-Man 2099 #1 is in fact the first appearance and origin of Spider-Man 2099. They say this 5-page preview in ASM 365 and an advertisement in Web of Spider-Man 90. Debatable first. Many sources cite ASM 365 as the first appearance of Spider-Man 2099, despite text on the cover of the issue that refers to it as a 5-page preview promoting Spider-Man 2099 #1. And in fact, a lot of people will make the argument that Web of Spider-Man 90 should in fact be the first appearance of Miguel O'Hara because you have this pinup teaser of him in the actual comic book right here. And then you have Marvel Age 114 that has a depiction of the character. And then, of course, you have this book right here, which is the Marvel Annual Report #1, which does have a cameo of the character as well with a line of dialogue, which again, I just bring up to talk about all the muddiness that comes with a lot of first appearances and characters and debates around, what should or shouldn't be the actual first appearance. But I thought it was really interesting because a lot of people, again, were kind of saying that this is actually a mistake, that PSA is messing up here and that they shouldn't be labeling this book the first appearance. But, to me, it really is a bigger question about who gets to decide these things. I mean, the community can debate about it, but if Overstreet decides to call Spider-Man 2099 #1 the first appearance, then that's what Overstreet decides. And then if CGC wants to make ASM 365 the first appearance, then that's what they get to decide. And then if Wizard Magazine came back and decided to make the Web of Spider-Man comic book the first appearance, that's what they would get to decide. And, if a Marvel card came out and said that, his actual first appearance was the Marvel Annual Report, the Finance Report book, well, that's what the Marvel card will get to decide. And so there really is no, governing body that gets to make up these labels. In fact, the way that people make up these labels is basically just the people that work at the company that is making this material. So I think that this is just an interesting debate. I'm not saying that PSA is right or wrong, and I think that a lot of people are used to the CGC distinctions at this point. I mean, I tend to usually go off of Key Collector myself. If I have, a certain character that I'm looking up their first appearance, my initial instinct is to look them up on Key Collector. That's kind of the one that I basically go to the most. But I'm not here to say that Key Collector is right either. There's there's a lot of people in the community that will argue about all these types of things. And it made me actually think, I mean, what if PSA decided to take X-Men 266, another controversial first appearance of one of our favorite characters, and they decided to call this book right here the second appearance of Gambit on the labels. And I actually had to look this one up, and I looked at it and said, first cover and full appearance of Gambit in continuity. I thought it was interesting because they added the in continuity aspect, which, if you guys happen to know, X-Men Annual 14 has been the one that a lot of people in the community have been saying this should in fact be the first appearance of Gambit because it came out before X-Men 266. Although if you guys know the history, X-Men 266 was supposed to initially come out before the annual, but because of printing issues or things like that, the Annual 14 ended up hitting stores first. The point I'm trying to make here is that what if they actually did decide to call this the second appearance of Gambit? I think in a lot of people in the community's eyes, they would be like, yes, finally, technically, they're right to do this. And then a lot of people would also be like, no, this is crazy. Why would they call this the second appearance of Gambit? But ultimately, because it's their company, they're allowed to make that call. You know, they can decide what they want to put on the label because who is there to decide otherwise? What do you guys actually think about this? Do you think that this is a mistake that PSA is labeling this book the first appearance when CGC labels 365 the first appearance? How would you guys feel if PSA decides other things should be first appearances? I mean, Mary Jane, for instance, has a lot of people's opinions about arguing which one should be the actual ASM book that makes her first debut appearance. You know, there's other characters that definitely have a lot of controversy here. I mean, dare I say it, what if PSA decided to call, you know, Hulk 180 the first appearance of Wolverine? I bet there'd actually be a lot of collectors that would celebrate that. I mean, I don't think that they would actually do it, but you guys get my point. Well, speaking of complaining and labels, I have one other interesting story to talk about. This is actually a post that came out of Arc Collectibles Instagram account. Shout out to Arc. He's a great collector. I'll put a link in the description to his thing. You guys should definitely go follow him. He's always talking about interesting art pieces and sales. But he had this to say about the Amazing Fantasy 15 that was recently graded by PSA that is actually a restored copy and will be sold on Golden Auctions. He said, I'm all for PSA entering the space and driving competition, but make restoration apparent and don't tell us to see QR code. Some rich window shopper will bomb a six-figure bid and get into it with an auction house. Include details on the label PSA Comics. Now, to put a little bit more clarity on what he's talking about here, if you guys don't know, this is actually a restored copy that's going to be sold on Golden Auctions, like I already said. And this is how PSA is deciding to do their restored labels. They are not doing the purple label that, of course, CGC, as we all know, does for their particular restored books. They are actually doing it more like CBCS. And actually, if you guys zoom in here, you'll notice that above the grade of the 9.6, they say restored. And then on the label, it says see QR code for restoration details. So they actually don't list out, you know, the fact that the book is trimmed or has color touch or whatever the case is. You'd actually have to go to the back right here and, you know, pull up the grader's notes with the QR code. Luckily for you guys, I already pulled up the grader's notes and we can kind of take a look here. This one has professional restoration, which includes binder holds at spine through the book filled, which is actually pretty impressive. Who knew that they could fill binder holes? Small pieces replaced at spine and top back cover, tiny small tears, whatever. And so this is kind of where you actually get to see the distinction of the restored book. Now, Arc isn't the only one that has had concerns about how they're doing this label, but, you know, to put it in perspective, I mean, CBCS has been doing this kind of similarly for a long time. If we kind of zoom into one of their new restored label books, I mean, it's still the blue label that we're used to seeing with them, and they kind of do the same thing where they have the restored distinction over the actual grade. The only difference is that they actually do list out, you know, what is going on with the book. Amateur restoration includes moderate amount of pieces added to cover and first wrap reinforced, yada, yada, yada. So where PSA is kind of doing the please see the QR code and look up the, you know, restoration details for yourself, you know, CBCS at least lists them out right here. And I can kind of see the argument of why I think a lot of collectors would prefer it to actually see the notes right here. I'm a little bit in the camp where I could see it either way. It doesn't necessarily bother me. In fact, I feel like I've heard this from people who are like super into CGC that, you know, if they could wave a magic wand and do it all over again, I don't think CGC would want to have the purple label. I think that they would have done away with like the green label and the purple label, because at this point, a lot of those labels have, you know, become scarlet letters. And I think that they're probably a little bit envious that PSA and even CBCS for that matter, just kind of kept the regular label and just added the little restored distinction. Now, I like probably a lot of you guys, am used to seeing, the purple label, and it's been very helpful for me to just quickly identify, okay, that's a restored book. But, kind of where things are going, I can imagine a world where, we start to get less and less of this info. I mean, think about CGC. Remember back in the day, like even for their blue labels, they used to have notes on the label that would say like cover detached or, large crease to cover. They would have a tape on interior of spine or whatever the case is. They'd have these distinctions. And then one day they decided, let's just remove all these things. And everyone in the comic community lost their mind, including myself. And, it was one of those things that after a while, you kind of looked at it, you look back on it, and you're like, you know what? It's kind of better that they got rid of it. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting soft in my old age here, but I don't mind it as much. I actually kind of prefer that the label is clean. And I sort of do wonder if this is maybe a similar thing. I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are like, oh, Swagwaw's trying to apologize for PSA. I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to be objective and, put it out for food for thought. I don't know. There's probably a happy medium in here. I think maybe it'd be good to see some of the restoration listed out. And probably, we need to see this restored like print be bigger in general. I mean, again, if you're going to buy this book and you're going to drop six figures on it, you better do your homework, right? I mean, shout out to Ark. I mean, I know, like, yeah, there's probably a lot of rich whales that are just going to, bid blindly. You're drunk one night and you don't really care, and you're like, yeah, I want a 9.6, $3 million. But even if you got 9 figures in the bank, you probably still want to make a savvy, smart, intelligent purchase on this, and you probably should still do your due diligence and make sure that you know what you're buying. So I don't know. Interesting stuff going on in the PSA label world right now. Them coming up with their own distinction of first appearances, them kind of doing something a little bit different here with the restoration label, although it's actually very similar to what CBCS did in the past. So it's very different compared to that of CGC. And I think that's really, kind of where this is all coming from. I think we as a community are so used to CGC doing it their way. But their way is just the way that they've been doing it. And now we have new companies that are interested in doing it in other ways. And I know that change is weird and change is scary. And I'm not saying that the way that PSA is doing it is better. I'm just saying that, they're kind of their own company and they get to decide and make the rules. And it's interesting to hear how the community reacts, which I'll leave it at that. What do you guys think about all this? How do you guys feel about them coming up with their own first appearance distinctions? How do you guys feel about how they're going to handle the restored books, just having a small footnote on it and you have to look up the grader's notes through QR codes or through the cert numbers? Let me know what you guys think. Anyways, that's all for this one. Thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you all in the next video.